Do you have thoughts on these developments with China? Trump accused China of meddling in the upcoming elections, and there are rumors that this is part of a bigger campaign against China.
I mean, obviously he'd like to change the subject from Russia because there the narrative is the meddling helped him get elected president. There may be something to what he says in the sense that his policies are frowned on by China, particularly this kind of incipient trade war that he may be starting. And also he's got some China hawks in the administration. And so naturally, they will ask themselves, well, what can we do to decrease the chances that he'll be reelected? We do the same thing. We did the same thing in Ukraine's election.
Oh, I know that you do that thing.
Yeah. Of course you know it, but you know it, but a lot of Americans don't realize it.
I mean, America has a pretty rich history of doing that thing.
Totally. And, apparently one thing that just pushed Putin over the edge by some accounts and led him to get more involved in the American election than he might have been otherwise is what we did in Ukraine. When we, to me, I'm interested in your perspective on this, Nikita, because to me, it doesn't seem crazy for Putin to think America abetted a coup in Ukraine. By that, I mean, you had a president who had been democratically elected, at least in the sense the presidents are in Ukraine. He was pro-Putin. He was pro-Russia. We did not like him. We gave various kinds of assistance to a movement that wound up having among its manifestations armed people in the street who the president found sufficiently threatening that he fled at night, right? Do I have the story basically right from your point? I mean, of course, that narrative
flashes. I mean, he fled after, this was ramping up. This
right.
It did start as a peaceful demonstration of students.
Right, of course. But I mean, there were people with guns, and he fled.
Sure, of course, yeah.
He fled for fear of some non-democratic means of deposal, right? Either he gets killed or winds up in prison. So,
yeah, and the involvement of, McCain was in the main square of Kiev talking from the stage to the protesters. Is it possible to imagine a Russian politician addressing a crowd of protesters in front of the White House?
I mean, this is just a perfect example of how far Americans are, and people are like this in general, but I think Americans are worse, how far Americans are from just understanding how the things they do are perceived. Like, I hadn't done that particular thought experiment. I had forgotten that McCain did that. Of course, what I remember is, Putin had tapes and publicized the tapes of a private conversation, not so private as it happens, phone conversation between our State Department European person. I can't quite remember her name. She's married to neoconservative Bob Kagan. But her and I think the ambassador of Ukraine, saying, okay, here's our guy. Here's who we want to be the next, I don't know if it's prime minister or president, but yeah, let's do that. Let's just install him. It almost sounded like that. But you're right. I mean, Americans just don't do the thought experiment because it's hard, and people in a lot of countries don't do it as much as they should. But I've asked themselves, wait a second. So from Russia's point of view, it's really not crazy to think that we were manipulating this election as forcefully or, as significantly, in a sense, if not in exactly the same ways, as we're accusing Russia of meddling in our election. I guess we didn't do anything flat out illegal like hack emails. But in any event, we've done illegal things in the past, God knows, right. Things that were illegal in the country we did them in to influence elections. But the point was just, I've heard accounts that our involvement in Ukraine is what pushed Putin over the edge and really led him to resolve to get serious about manipulating American elections. I don't know if that's true, but anyway, that's where were we? How did we start out on this? Oh, the China thing. So, you know, yeah, I assume China's trying to influence the outcome of our election. You know, we try to influence the outcome of elections, and they'd be crazy not to. But I don't know. Trump hasn't laid out any specifics. So I don't really know what he's talking about.
We had in one of our conversations that did not get published, we talked about, I asked you whether you can think of a possible, like a candidate for an outside foe for Americans that could unite them, as opposed, like Russia is a boogeyman, but liberals are not going to buy, but conservatives are not buying that because it's too tight with Trump. And Islam countries, you know, liberals have this whole thing about Islamophobia, and it's difficult to find a candidate like that. And you said that China might be a candidate.
They might, although the dynamics of tribal psychology are funny. Now that Trump is trying to make China a boogeyman, that'll be harder for liberals. That'll make it harder for liberals to do that, because tribalism is so much focused on the individual. It's like, we hate Trump. Whatever he hates, we like. Whatever he likes, we hate. It's not quite that simple. But that's why liberals, who used to be the doves in the Cold War, are suddenly like these Russia hawks, because they think Russia was involved in helping Trump become president, and that Trump is beholden to them. And why conservatives, who used to be the Cold War hawks, are more inclined to raise questions now about whether the evidence against Russia is really so damning. Although a lot of conservatives are still pretty anti-Russia. I mean, Trump, when he seemed to be subservient or too sympathetic to Putin at the Helsinki summit, he got it from both sides big time. So there's that. Now I should go, because I want to at least check in, get my wife and daughter's take on the testimony I may have missed by now, although it may still be going on, before we have the meeting we're going to have with other people. So I guess I'll stop recording now. Any last thoughts from Russia on this whole thing? You know, it'd be interesting to talk about sometime is like Russia and Me Too. Like, what are the norms that prevail in Russia about what you can do and say in these contexts, what's acceptable and what's not. So, but think about that.
Yeah, I'll think about that. That would be a complicated conversation.
That's the kind we have.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why we have a small but elite audience. We have complicated conversations.